You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. Whether it's for food, fuel, drinks, or snacks, about half of the U.S. population shops at a convenience store every day. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
Today, we're going to take a proverbial trip across the pond and talk with an expert in convenience retail in Wales. But we're not stopping there. We're going to talk virtually about everything in the whole wide world of convenience. We're going to talk a little bit about electric vehicles and how they fit in the broader picture of retail evolution, and a bit more. Welcome to Convenience Matters. I'm Carolyn Schnare with NACS.
And I am John Eichberger with the Fuels Institute and NACS. Carolyn, it's great to be on the program with you again.
You again. I mean, I was saying earlier, this is one of the few times you and I get to host together, so good times.
You know, scraping the bottom of the barrel every once in a while, I guess.
Well, in addition to us, today we're going to talk with my good friend Dan Munford, who's the Executive Director of Insight in the UK, as well as the NACS European partner. Hello, Dan.
Hi, Carolyn, John, how are you doing? Nice to be with you.
It's so good to talk to you. It's been quite a while, even longer since we've last seen each other, but I love to hear your voice. And I know you and I can talk for hours, but in the interest of our short time, I wanted to hone in first on the evolution of retail, but especially in light of 2020, all that's happened. And one of the things that you've been talking a lot about lately, at least on your LinkedIn, I've seen some really interesting posts, is electric vehicles, especially in the UK, which I know has been announced recently that they're propelling ahead further and faster than ever before. And I know that's an interesting topic for you and especially for John. So at a high level, can you tell us, and this is probably too broad of a question, some of your thoughts on consumer EV adoption and retailer adoption?
Well, it's a fascinating topic. I mean, maybe best to start off with a soundbite and then try and justify it. I suppose, you know, with the regards to EV adoption and consumer behaviors, it's early days, but we know some things, I think, is a soundbite. Early days, because if you think about the fuels value chain, it took over 100 years for that to develop, and it's still developing, isn't it? But if we look at the EV charging value chain, it's, you know, very immature and mistakes are being made. Good things are being done. Things are moving forward, but it's still very early days. And I think maybe just setting the scene for a brief discussion on this, it's just good to recognize its immaturity. And I think you have to look at individual markets and think about their uniqueness in order to overlay, how this is going to develop in those markets.
You know, Dan, a lot of people point to the Norwegian example. They're clearly ahead of almost every other country in the world in terms of EV evolution, but it's also a very unique market. It's a small market. It's a very homogenous market. I think it's difficult to draw parallels from Norway and say, well, we can just follow their model and that's the path of going forward. I mean, you take a look at the US, completely different model. Completely not, you cannot draw apples to apples. The UK maybe it's a little different. One of the things I find interesting about the UK, because we'll talk about charging in a second, but your prime minister started off a couple years ago, UK made an announcement, we're going to go no more combustion engines by 2040. Then last year, Prime Minister Johnson goes, we're going to do it by 2035. Then you fast forward to the end of last year, you got California saying we're going to do 2035, Quebec saying we're going to do 2035, and Johnson goes, no, we're going to do 2030. So the timeline, and at least in the political world, the timeline for pushing EVs and getting rid of combustion is accelerating, yet the market has not really kept pace with that. So, I mean, open that up to your thoughts and musings on those commentaries, because I see a lot of disconnect between the hype, the coverage, the announcements, and the reality on the ground.
Well, maybe to start by sort of tackling the UK political question, and then I'll respond on some of the Norwegian. How is Norwegian relevant? Just taking your point on that. I think, obviously the UK has got a very aggressive 2030 timeline on ending, diesel, petrol vehicle, passenger vehicle sales. It's very aggressive. Why has that happened? Is it serious? Should we base our planning for our business decisions on that timeline? They're all very big questions. It's really difficult to answer them all. But, I suppose what I'd say is that, these companies are already taking big decisions in the UK on the basis of that decision, because really, if they want to be responsible to their shareholders, it's very difficult not to be. Now, whether that target is entirely realistic or not is another matter. But, I suppose if you're a big company and a government, whatever the sort of history to decision making on this subject comes out with that 2030 target, then you have to start. It's not very far away, and you have to start making decisions. So I think the other thing that I'd say, really sort of broadening the discussion out a bit and relating it to, which markets are going to move quicker on this and which markets are going to move slower on this. I think you have to look at the decarbonisation timetable in different national markets, and this is something obviously you can find out quite easily. I mean, if you look at the UK, why has the UK been so aggressive on transportation for decarbonisation? And in many ways, the reason is because, we don't get our power from coal-fired power stations anymore. It's only 2% of the total here. They're almost, out of action entirely. So if the UK has done some stuff, in other words, if the UK is actually going to meet its targets, its legally mandated targets for decarbonisation, it has to look at transportation. Or this is how the government feel. They have to look at transportation and they have to look at home heating. Other countries are in different positions. Germany, I think 24% of their power is still generated through coal power stations. The US, I think, is slightly more than that, about the same level. So, there are ways that, as an example, those countries can get to, can meet their targets without necessarily dealing so aggressively with transportation. So, I mean, it's not obviously governments come out with statements and press releases all the time, and sometimes there's not a lot of thought goes into them, unfortunately, for the business world. However, I think perhaps you've got to take this quite seriously if you look at where the UK is on decarbonisation generally.
Dan, what do people think? What are the consumers, the drivers, the people who maybe yet haven't purchased those cars? Because as I understand it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that this applies, at least in the UK, to only to having only electric vehicles, no combustible engine, and hybrid. I wasn't quite able to figure out. I think they were either banned from the list or they had to be primarily battery powered. I don't know if there's a percentage of battery versus combustible engines, but fully electric. So where are the customers on this debate?
Well, I suppose the customers, want something that works for them, don't they? I mean, they're thinking about nice, shiny cars that work and get them, from A to B in an efficient manner, and as in as stylish a way as possible. All these things. They don't. I guess they see things differently to us in our industry. And to politicians as well. I mean, I think one thing has changed, and that is the availability of attractive, more affordable models coming into the market. And obviously we're seeing that in lots of different markets around the world. And we're seeing the Tesla Model 3 making inroads. We're seeing VW with its ID3, and then soon the ID4 and Skodas coming onto the market in Europe, which are quite a lot more affordable than some of the models we've seen out there. So, I mean, again, I think it's all about trying to find the right balance. But what we have to say is that Norway has grown to about 12% of Norway's passenger vehicle car park is now full EV. That's not counting plug-ins, right? And Norway got there in, 10 years or so, took to get to that level. During that period, the cars were the electric vehicles weren't very attractive for many of those years. They were, not great choices. What we're seeing now, and this will have a factor in lots of markets, is that the electric vehicles are much better and in many cases highly attractive vehicles. So, I think it may be sort of expanding your point. You have to think about how attractive these consumer products are, and they have got a lot more attractive.
Well, that played out last year. I mean, the global market for light-duty vehicles got hammered by the pandemic. But in Europe, I believe EVs actually increased sale units by like 20% over the year prior. In the United States, they lost 3%, but the overall market lost 15%. I think the type of vehicle Europeans typically buy is very different from the one we buy in the United States. In the United States, we like big vehicles. And in the European Union, much more akin to smaller compact cars, which early on fit the EV model very well. In the US, the projection is by the end of the 2020s, 75% of the EVs produced here will be light trucks and utility vehicles. So they're coming into we have to put the powertrain in the vehicle the customers want to buy. In Europe, they've already done that. In the United States, they're getting to that point. The next couple of years is going to be a much different market over here. So, I mean, I can see the EU and the UK going a lot faster than the US just because the market dynamics and the consumer preference for vehicle type is so different.
I think you're right, John. I mean, just getting back on the Norway point, just to some of your earlier points, I think I agree with you, and I don't think anyone who looks at Norway and says, "Okay, we're going to have the Norwegian experience," is oversimplifying things massively. Having said that, Norway is the best we've got, and therefore there's a lot of learning. Anyone who doesn't look at Norway is really missing a trick. There's a lot of learning to be had from there. I mean, I've spent more time in that market than any other market I've traveled to over the last 3 years for that reason, and I've learned an awful lot. But I've also learned, I mean, I'll give you two examples. I mean, I've also learned how it's different, how it's similar. I mean, one of the things I think we're going to see in the UK is a lot of frustration around charging anxiety, because we've seen that in Norway. A lot of experience with charging queues. According to the EV Association in Norway, 47% of drivers in Norway experience queues for charging, and 39% experience chargers that don't work. So all those experiences will be true, maybe more, possibly in markets like the UK. So that, and how we respond to that, how we plan that, that's incredibly useful learning for the UK. So that's, I guess, a positive for really focusing on Norway. I mean, a negative may be that UK's power grid is quite weak, potentially for what is going to be asked of it. So what about that? How much will that impact? And how, this is a tight deadline. So, some of these, there's some big differences there. And also, how many people are going to be able to charge at home in Norway? I mean, again, according to the EV Association in Norway, 78% charge at home, only 9% fast charge, which is obviously, if you just put that onto the UK, it's not very attractive proposition for roadside retailers. Having said that, will that be different in the UK because of the unique characteristics in the UK market in terms of the availability, of the right power connection, and how people live in the UK, whether they have on-site charging at home. So, I think you have to, again, just summarizing, you have to learn. You can really learn a lot from the Norwegian example, and then you have to overlay your unique market characteristics to make that make sense and help you create your strategy in whichever market you're in.
So Dan, you raised a ton of great points. There's so many elements that go into successfully bringing electric vehicles to the market, whether it be the charging infrastructure, the grid reliability. You look at the reliability in California and Texas, here in the United States. It's just, there's so much that goes into it. And unfortunately, the EV advocates sometimes say, we can just do this. We just have to make it happen. But if we don't all work together to build the infrastructure, to build the reliability, it's going to be a failed experiment. And, in the UK, you guys got 9 years to get this stuff together. It's going to be an interesting watch the sprint within your community, because it's going to be a very big challenge. In the United States, we have much longer on-ramp, I think, but globally, man, it's a big lift, and we can't underestimate the lift it's going to take to be successful on this.
Very fair point.
So, Dan, you said something earlier about how you used to travel to Norway and probably took a lot of pictures, some really great video. You had a fantastic video series, and still have one, Retail Vision, where you interviewed CEOs and really just brilliant minds within the retail and convenience industries. But obviously that has probably not been able to happen for almost a good year now. We're in 2021, but it's been one hell of a year. So given that, you were able to just completely pivot your business model to the point where you have been, it's almost like you never stopped. You just kept traveling the globe, talking to really smart people, but this time using the magic of the internet. And I know you've spoken with John at least once, and it's really been amazing to just see retailers and how they've pivoted. I hate using that word. Over this last year. So with that, how has this changed the way you see retail? And how has this just changed the way you adapt and interview and find new cool ideas out there?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess like everybody else, I really miss seeing people and seeing countries and so on. But, that great phrase, it's not a problem, it's an opportunity, I think is really true for business. And obviously this was a big challenge for us. A big part of our business was events and which involved travel. But luckily, Shop Talk Live has been, just an absolute exciting journey, really. I absolutely love it. I love, obviously I'd like to go to the markets, but physically, I mean, we were in Dubai last Thursday. We're in Australia next Thursday. I just couldn't physically do that if we were running events, but we can do it virtually. So I think, a lot of what we've learnt over the last year will still apply after COVID. And it can help, join up the world, our particular industry very, very effectively, So, we've got to take the positives from this. And, for us, obviously, Shop Talk Live has been a big positive. I mean, we've done 23 shows. We call them shows, even though they're webinars, because we treat them like shows. We put a lot of research into them. And, we try very hard to make them very punchy. And, it's as a result, we get some, because of some great guests, there's a lot of learning available there for the global industry. And that's why I guess that, they've been popular. And, if we keep putting all that effort in, then I think we'll continue quite nicely with Shop Talk Live.
Well, it's not often you can get 3 retail leaders in the same spot, in the same call, or the same show, I should say, to talk about things that they're doing as honestly as possible. There was one that I watched a couple weeks ago, and it was in Puerto Rico in a store, and there's customers at the time frame, I think it must have been morning rush hour, and it was amazing just to see people moving along. The guest was just talking as if nothing was happening behind him. It was so cool.
No, he's smooth. Rodrigo is a smooth operator. I think we all are looking forward to getting together again. But at the same time, I was, before the pandemic, I was on an airplane every week, if not every other week, multiple airplanes, going to visit people. And I think this idea that, in order to prove that you care about a relationship, you have to get on a plane and go see them. I don't think that's the case anymore. I'm not going to do 6-hour round trip flights for an hour meeting again. I think we've established you can have a relationship and be productive on video. We need to get together in some circumstances, but we don't need to do it exclusively, because we've experienced this opportunity to make us a lot more nimble and, quite frankly, hopefully improve our quality of life. I haven't been sick in a year because I haven't been on an airplane. And, that's never happened. So, I'm not going back to the way it was before. There's no chance.
No, that's a great point, John. I think the reality was, I used to have a life a few years ago where I'd consider going to Australia for a couple of nights. It's complete madness when you think about it, in terms of what it does to your body. But I've been there and done that a few too many times, to be honest. And I think it's not something that you can do much into your 50s, I don't think. And, realistically, I think that's probably gone. Just looking ahead to what normal is going to be like after COVID, for our industry and for us personally, I think talking to a lot of retailers, they do want to go to they do want to travel regularly, but they realize they're not going to be traveling as much. So when they go, There's got to be some big events as part of that trip. There's got to be a lot of meetings, and they're going to be going for a little bit longer, I think, on each of their trips. I mean, let's take the example of the NACS show. So I think, quite a lot of European retailers actually will want to go to the NACS show, but they're going to extend that trip either before or after the NACS show. And they're going to be doing a lot of other things in perhaps the US market as well. And then they won't be going back to the US for a while, and they probably need to put more planning into that trip than they would have done in previous years pre-COVID. They still need those regular trips because they will lose track. They will, lose connection with what's going on and contacts. And we'll all do that if we just keep on, stay on Zoom or Teams. So I think it's going to be, it's going to be a different world, but we will have some physical events. It'll just be slightly different, I think, when we plan those events.
So, Dan, to that point, I know I always really enjoyed coming over across the pond over to the UK for store tours, whether it was a NACS event or an Insight event or just to say hi. And I know we've chatted offline to say that you're going to be one of the first people I visit when I can get on an airplane, though, and I'm sure it'll be a little while before us Americans are allowed back out of the country. But that said, what's some ways that our listeners can find you? Maybe where they also can find more about Shop Talk Live, and then if you want to close out with maybe some crystal ball insights as to when the next time we can have a store tour together over there.
Well, Shop Talk Live is you can find it on the Global Convenience Store Focus website. We always feature the recordings. We like people to join us live, but if they can't, we'll always play the recording, within a 24 or 48 hours of doing it. So you can find those on the Shop Talk Live website, or if you follow me on LinkedIn, I'll post about them. So that's easy. Just in terms of what's next, well, I mean, it may well be that the NACS show is the next big thing that we all see a lot of each other at. I think, realistically, I think a lot of people will start traveling over the summer, but it kind of depends where your country is on vaccination, eh? The UK will be pretty vaccinated by July, but I think a lot of people will be taking summer holidays, and the big business trips will be planned, September, October time, and that's going to be incredibly busy, from attending physical events perspective. So I think, in a way, you're not going to have to travel very far, Carolyn, to see me. It will be at the NACS show, and I'll see you there too, John.
Most certainly.
Absolutely.
Well, that's October 2021. So I really appreciate that we are able to connect like this, whether it's through our podcast, whether it's in Shop Talk Live. I can see you and your team working hard across things, whether it's Fuels Institute. You guys have a ton of daily or weekly and monthly updates and video chats. So, this is our normal for a little while, and I think we're all making the best of it. So I really appreciate your time with us today, Dan and John. It was really fun. Let's do this, you and me
Absolutely.
again. And thank you all for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.